Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Crypto Hipster Podcast. This is your host, Jamil Hassan, the Crypto Hipster, where I interview founders, co-founders, entrepreneurs, executives, musicians, artists, everybody across the board in crypto and blockchain all around the world. And I always bring you amazing guests. And today I have another amazing guest. His name is Martinho Lucas Pires. Hopefully I did the last name right. Well, hopefully correct. He is the head of public and regulatory affairs at the international consultancy firm and a university lecturer at Nova School of Law. Martinho, welcome.
Thank you very much, Jamal. And thank you for hosting me here in your amazing podcast.
It's the honor is all mine. Pleasure. So let's kick things off because I'm really excited about today's topic. And ask you the first question is, what is your background, and is it a logical background for what you're doing now?
Well, that's a really interesting question. Well, I think it sort of is. So I have a kind of very diverse background because I'm trained as a lawyer. So my university degree is in law. Here in Europe, unlike the US, we don't have the graduate division, so we do law as a bachelor degree. That's my formation, my academic background, and I'm a lawyer registered with the Portuguese bar. But at the same time, I'm also an academic. I was an academic researcher, and I still am an academic researcher and a lecturer. I just recently finished my PhD, submitted a thesis, so I'm waiting for its defense. And what I do basically is a mixture of these two things. So I'm not really a lawyer, I'm more of a consultant, a business consultant, but specialized in regulatory affairs. So it requires some kind of more, while lawyers have a more, let's say, technical job in terms of advising clients and et cetera, I'm more handy on the business and what they have to do. Although my focus is always to try to establish better practices in regulatory affairs, and also in a way fight for them in discussing with regulators, representing customers with the policymakers, and et cetera, basically that.
And so you're both the international consultancy firm and the digital currencies governance group, right? And I'm an individual member of the global DCA, was similar. So what's your focus on for the governance group, and what unique perspective do you bring to the table that can help move the industry forward?
So the digital currencies governance group is kind of, let's say, it's more focused on public affairs. So in a way to defend or educate policymakers and regulators around the world about what is crypto, what is the crypto industry, what is the benefits that crypto is bringing to the table, how is the crypto industry organized, what are the interests of the crypto industry, kind of making the intermediation between crypto businesses and regulators and policies all over. We're focused in Europe, but also collaborate with regulators in Dubai, for example, in Brazil, and ICF is more, let's say, kind of a consulting arm of that. So instead of just working in policy and public affairs, we also do business development of crypto businesses, always with an interest in how they comply with current regulations or how they navigate all the problems that these regulations have. So it's kind of a two-faced job. At DCGG, I work more as a consultant, and I use my academic side more, so kind of drafting opinions, studying new initiatives that, for example, the EU is taking, either on MiCA or the AI Act or whatever, and also try to make that bridge between what are regulators looking at. There's this kind of information gap between the industry and regulators, and I'm trying just to make ends meet and see how they can get together and build a better regulation that is not only good for consumers, which is what regulators are concerned about, but also for businesses, right? So to kind of create a fostering, innovative environment full of entrepreneurs, and it can also dynamize the jurisdiction in which this regulation is being applied.
Excellent. I want to congratulate you first on the PhD, and good wish you well on the defense.
Thank you very much, Jamal. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. My wife's an attorney, so I get deposed all the time. Yeah, so it's a fun experience.
I understand the feeling.
But you mentioned MiCA, and I want to talk.
Yeah.
It was approved last week. So I want to find out from you, what are the highlights of that approval, and what would be the impact of this law?
So I'm going to start by answering the second part of your question because of the impact. Because the impact, I think, is going to be huge in the sense that it's the first time that, well, first of all, it's the first comprehensive piece of legislation that a significant political bloc, in this case the EU, enacts. But there's no comparison in the world. Like there are jurisdictions that have their blockchain laws or rules, but none with this dimension as the EU. Imagine like the US now making a federal statute on crypto, which they're trying to do for some time, but they're having some complications in trying to do this. So, and so this is going to bring some kind of an advantage, a competitive advantage to the EU, in the sense that if you want regulatory certainty and regulatory clarity, which is something that is being very fought for. Also, again, I don't want to bring the US example, but the US example is kind of paradigmatic in this. What can a crypto company do? Is a crypto company a financial company or not? If I issue a token is security or not? And there's this very strong regulation by enforcement. Here is more, let's say a preemptive form of regulation. So setting up the base for businesses to grow. And the impact is really interesting because it's going to be the same law, so it's an EU law, and it's going to be the same law for all EU member states. So if you want to incorporate a crypto business in Portugal, it's going to be the same rules as the crypto business in Germany. It's going to be the same rules as the crypto business in France. And so you'll have basically 27 nation states that are following the same requirements. And so the impact, I think, is going to be internally is going to be pretty big. So it's some states don't have in the EU don't have crypto regulations, and now they're going to start to have. But also, I think from an external perspective, looking at other countries in South America, Africa, North America, and Asia, the EU took a very important first step, and they're probably going to influence also how those states are going to are going to approach crypto regulation. What MiCA does basically is to set up a framework for the registration, licensing of businesses that are involved in economic activities with crypto assets. So that either issue stable coins or issue, in MiCA, they're called asset reference tokens, or if they issue e-money tokens, or if they issue other types of tokens that are neither of these first ones that I told, nor securities per se. If it is securities, then typical traditional financial regulation in the EU applies. And so MiCA is important because of this, because it kind of devises a specific framework for the crypto sector, for the issuing, custody, selling of crypto, and at the same time kind of cuts this regulation out of, so carves kind of this regulation out of financial regulation or traditional financial regulation and banking regulation. So it becomes kind of a specific set of rules for the business, which is also interesting. And in a way, it's also a source of complication because you never know also if when there's a superimposition of businesses and business practices, how these rules are going to apply with financial rules or banking rules. So, but I think that the impact, either bad or good, it's gonna exist. It's gonna be like a very significant impact in crypto businesses in the EU and beyond.
Right. So before I find out what you think about the long-term impact, I want to go back to a comment where you said that you don't want to talk about the US, but I have to because I'm in the US.
Sure.
The EU is saying, you know what? I think what you just said, the EU said is our current laws were not adequate, so we had to reevaluate that and look and create a new law. And I see that happening in the Philippines, in Hong Kong, in Japan, in China, and everywhere. While the SEC in the US says, you know, we have this law that's 90 years old and before the advent of technology, and it applies today. You know, why is that so wrong? And what should the US learn from what you guys are doing?
Well, I think the US has something which we Europeans are always like jealous of, which is you're much more dynamic in terms of your markets, whatever they are. So you have a more entrepreneurial society, and you also feel you're less risk averse than Europeans. And that's also seen in the way the regulation exists and the way also that your legal system in a way works. You're much more, let's say, you're much more pro litigation in a way, like let's do things, and if something bad happens, then we'll solve it in courts. And also because you have a common law system where precedent takes a very important setting of legal impact, contrary, for example, to a lot of jurisdictions in Europe, which are civil law based. So we rely more on statutes than, in fact, on litigation. This can be seen advantage. Like if you look at the state of the crypto market of like big crypto companies, et cetera, the US has much more crypto companies, or at least still has much more crypto companies than the EU. I think what the US can learn is that a lot of crypto businesses in the US started to try to do, because they could, or they thought they could, start to go into areas like financial law, securities law, where the US has a very strong enforcement practice. And in the EU, things are like, enforcement is seen usually as a last resort, like if something is not really complying with the rules. And before we try to understand why, or in general, there are jurisdictions in Europe that are a bit more aggressive than others. Some of them, they are more, let's say, conservative in the way they receive new technologies than others. But I think in general, there's this interest in trying to understand what is happening and what they can bring to the table. And I think what we did in the EU that the US could learn is we understood that if we don't regulate this now, this is going to go out of our hands. Because what we had in the EU was that some member states like Malta, France also started having some rules, Lithuania, they were already issuing rules specific to crypto. And so you started having this distortion where you have some member states that are like in the front of the line, and other member states that also want a piece of the cake, but they also have other regulatory concerns that they don't know very well how to tackle. So MiCA is also a way of trying to create, let's say, a level playing field among the member states. And by setting these common rules. And I think that in the US would be very important on the sea. But again, it depends on, I think, with how things have evolved in the US, specifically with the SEC enforcements on basically everything that moves and issues crypto. I was now following and reading yesterday, like Coinbase's now move, right, where they want kind of litigate against the SEC and the SEC's understanding to try to see and change their view. And I think, and maybe that's the way that things have to be done in the US, like through litigation, which is another form of political procedure or policy making. I don't think that it's probably the most advantageous because it's very focused, right? Coinbase is going to litigate on their terms, and the SEC is going to have to engage with Coinbase on the terms of that specific case. And then we're going to have to try to extract general rules for the rest of the sector. Whilst in the EU, you have the general rules already here. I'm not saying that the EU's approach is perfect, because although we have a general law that will apply in exact terms in all member states, there are still many differences in applications. For example, the law doesn't discuss anything regarding AML, for example. MiCA doesn't discuss anything, and AML is going to be the subject of a new directive. So, which means that, and directives, we have two different systems of harmonizing national law in the EU. So we can do either regulation, like MiCA, which is directly applicable in its terms on all EU member states. So so EU member states don't need to do anything. They don't need to transpose. It's like federal law. And then we have this directive, which is a federal law, which the member states have to transpose into their own national laws. And this allows for some flexibility on the part of the member states and to acknowledge and to kind of carve out certain national exceptions to this. And so, and also another difference is that the crypto market is not the same in all EU member states, right? So member states like Germany are much more developed, they have much more venture capital backing than these type of companies. For example, banks in Germany can already custody crypto assets. Or in France, for example, there are already specific rules for people that want to do ICOs. So in Portugal, there are no rules for ICOs. There are no rules for banks to hold crypto or not. There are only rules for businesses that want to do crypto businesses to register for AML purposes. But so the picture is still going to be a little bit fragmented, and a bit of tuning and cooperation between member states is going to have to be done.
It's interesting you mentioned ICO, because I was an ICO advisor back in 2017, and somebody said to me, the US market is the only market that matters. And that's no longer true. Mm-hmm. I believe that other markets like the EU are going to be very impactful. So what do you think will be the long-term effects of MiCA, including the challenges that lie ahead, and how does the EU navigate these challenges collectively? Because like you said, there's a disparity between the different countries.
Well, MiCA took some time to be approved, right? This was not an easy process. And I remember when the first proposal of MiCA was put forward on the table. I think we were around 2019, 2020, that everyone was saying, oh, but wait a minute, you guys are regulating ICOs. And ICOs was a 2017 thing. Now we have, I don't know, NFTs. Now DeFi is starting to take place. And for example, NFTs are excluded from MiCA. DeFi is also not, well, a lot of people say that DeFi is not covered by MiCA. Others say that there might be some areas where DeFi is going to be impacted by MiCA. But the fact is that when MiCA was being approved last week, there were already discussions in Brussels about a MiCA 2. So a new set of regulatory measures that are going to cover specifically DeFi or decentralized finance and other developments. Also, there's a lot of, let's say, secondary legislation, let's call it like that. For example, rules on, the EU is now reforming rules on data management for business purposes. And there are rules there that people say are going to impact the smart contracts on blockchains and how you develop smart contracts for privacy reasons. You have, and also the AI regulation that is coming forward. You have rules on the digital operational resilience of financial institutions. So, and you also have changes to EU financial rules to try to accommodate security tokens or tokenized securities, whatever they're going to have to call them in the end. So, MiCA, I think, is a first step in the conversation. I don't think it's an ideal first step because legislators moved slowly and the market doesn't wait for regulators, and so it's ever evolving. And so this was kind of a first step in trying to regulate the market, but there's still a lot to be done and still a lot of discussions to happen. And we don't know also how the market is going to play out. So now we're just coming off Ethereum becoming a proof of stake protocol. We're coming off, we don't know what are going to be the major DeFi players in a year or 2 years. We're still there. People are expecting through this kind of inflationary crisis to see how Bitcoin's price and adoption is going to grow or not. So there's a lot of uncertainty also in the market and how this, we don't see how AI still is going to be combined with blockchain or not. What are the major applications they are going to bring to the table? So we're still in this kind of cloud or in the metaverse. Remember the metaverse, everyone's talking about the metaverse. How is the metaverse going to come? So if you are a small state that can regulate, that want to regulate things, you have an advantage because you're small, so you can regulate things pretty quickly. If you're a big political, I'm going to call it polity in the way, but the EU is not a state, but to call it just an international organization, I don't think is also correct. You take more time to do this because it's so many different interests, right? It's a bit like when you look at Congress and the Senate and how the crypto bills and the discussions around crypto are evolving, right? They've listened to everyone since Facebook wanted to do Libra. Now they're also listening to Gensler. They like it, but when you see the action that they want to do or not, it's not clear. It's not clear how the US is moving. So, so I think maybe resuming, is an interesting first step and a necessary first step, but it's a first step. A lot of things still are going to have to be fine-tuned, and I think we have to wait for the next 1 to 2 years to understand how that's going to play. A funny thing, and with this just finishing the answer, is that MiCA was approved last week, but it's only coming into force fully in 1.5 years. So when MiCA comes into force, really, member states are already trying to prepare themselves, and businesses in Europe are already preparing themselves for this. But in 2 years' time, I don't know how the market is going to be, and if MiCA is going to have any advantage, or if everyone is going to be just launching DAOs and decentralized and DeFi's and going outside of the scope of MiCA. So let's wait and see how it's going to play. Interesting times.
Yeah. So you mentioned some of the, actually a few follow-ups. You mentioned some of the subsectors, right? The MiCA covers or doesn't cover. And what do you think are some of the areas they need to look at, like in some of these subsectors, like DeFi, like the metaverse, NFT, and gaming, which are the big four right now, and the shifting regulatory waters and the issues? What do you see as potentially coming down the pike they got to look at, or the challenges they're going to have looking at it?
I think that's a really interesting question. But I'm going to have to be speculative, but my hunch, and from what I see in Brussels and in the member states, I think the biggest thing they're going to try to deal with is DeFi, decentralized finance. So the provision of financial services or services that can be equivalent to financial activity through the issuance of tokens, liquidity, stakings, money makers, AMMs, etc., through computer programs, so through protocols and decentralized protocols. I think that is the way they're going to look, because one thing is, MiCA is more, if we have to be honest, is more about, let's say, exchanges or companies issuing tokens per se, but it's not about really the decentralization and about centralized protocols and about how these protocols connect with one another, about algorithmic stable coins, for example. So it doesn't enter into that world, also because of the challenges in entering the world. Like, who are you going to regulate? Like, a lot of regulation is about liability of the market actors. Like, who is going to be liable? And also the model in which certain protocols work. Think about Ethereum, for example, where you have, let's say, this decentralized governance or this distributed governance where you have many different players, all of them financing developers all over the world to try to participate. So who is going to be liable? Is the whole system? Is everyone that holds Ethereum and therefore contributes to the governance of the protocol through its proof of stake? And there are challenges here. And I think the main challenge for European regulators is going to be how to handle the intersection between crypto and TradeFi, so traditional finance, in the sense of, so basically the thing that the US is now dealing with, which is, the SEC is basically saying every token in a way is a security. So we're going to regulate like basically every token that we see, except for those that maybe the commodities institute regulator said that are already commodities, and so maybe we're not going to touch into that in that place. But the thing is, in Europe, people are very scared of defining a security token. Also because the definition, you have the Howey test in the US, and in the EU, we have there are member states that have different notions of what security is. And so the EU regulation is purposely left open. There are examples or common examples of what security is, for example, a share, bonds, an ETF, or a derivatives contract. But there's always this kind of open gap that regulators don't want to close. And this has potential disadvantages for crypto. For example, let's think of gaming, right? And because what crypto brings to the table is it facilitates, let's say, the financialization or the monetization of digital value, right? So we can be, let's say, making through crypto and through decentralized protocols, let's say, I don't know, ETFs or whatever you want, over I don't know, weapons in the metaverse or items in the metaverse. Maybe we can even make, let's say, a lease in the metaverse or mortgage and in the metaverse, and then sell it as a token. I don't know. I'm thinking you can think of gazillions of possibilities on this. And if this is considered, and there is always a slim chance because it's about there's this always a saying which is if it looks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, if it flies like a duck, then it is a duck. It's a way that regulators, even in Europe, are looking a lot like this. And there's this fear of like, okay, then everything that is being done in crypto, be it gaming, be it NFTs, be it that is similar to or equivalent to a financial instrument, is finance. And so it should be regulated by finance. And so forget MiCA, forget MiCA 2. It's let's go all to financial regulation. So, and my fear is how this line is going to be drawn, where it's going to be drawn, and how. That's the thing that I see. So regulators are going to be more focused on in the next years, and in order to capture what I think in Portuguese we have this expression which is I think maybe you also have it in English, which is the golden goose, right? The golden goose or the chicken with the golden eggs. We call it the chicken with the golden eggs. So the most precious treasure is a chicken with the golden eggs, and the chicken with the golden eggs is DeFi, because it's the one that generates more liquidity, can have more impact also in terms of financial stability, systemic risk. So how this is going to be covered by EU regulations is the $1 million question that everyone is waiting to see.
I agree with that. I do. So interesting. So there's also another component, and you mentioned this. You said this past week or weekend, the EU pushed forward with its new artificial intelligence framework, the new AI framework. How does this framework intersect with the MiCA rules and regulations for crypto, or does it not?
That's also a really good question, because it's still unclear at the point. So one thing is, MiCA is a sector-based regulation. So it focuses on the sector of crypto assets, selling, custody, issuing crypto assets in the market. And AI is a broader kind of regulatory framework, because it's not only about crypto. It's basically about any kind of economic activity that uses AI technology. And one of the biggest problems that's being discussed is shouldn't the regulation be, let's say, trimmed into kind of sub-regulations or subsets of rules for different economic sectors, because it's basically saying that if you want to use a deep learning AI on finance, is the same thing as using deep learning AI on other kind of businesses. And it might not be like that. It can be different. But so the thing is, we don't know very well that MiCA doesn't talk anything about AI or the use of AI instruments for, let's say, issuing or custody of the business. And so the suspicion is that the AI regulation is going to apply also to crypto businesses. The question then will be how, let's say, some exchanges or some protocols use AI mechanisms, because the AI regulation basically does kind of a risk assessment of AI mechanisms. So you have certain AI mechanisms that are prohibited, just full on, like some of them concerning social scores and all that stuff. But then you have some that are kind of high level risk that need to be regulated, like you have to have, it's called usually the black box problem. You have to have access to their algorithm, or at least there has to be some kind of transparency of how their algorithm works, duty of information from the company that is producing the algorithm and using the algorithm to serve the business, or using the AI application to serve the business. So so there are many, there's still very big uncertainty on this. But if you think about protocols, and again, we go back to DeFi, if you think about crypto protocols that make use of very complex programs and AI-based programs for calculating, for example, liquidity pools and transfer of liquidity from one pool to the other, making investments, stabilization of stable coins, and etc. So very high complex smart contracts in a way. Where would they fit within this risk assessment? Will they be high level risks? Would they be low level risk? And so it's still something that the industry is scared of because especially the DeFi industry, because one thing is you are a company and you have to present your, this is already challenging for companies, right? If you produce an AI instrument, because you have to be open about the AI instrument that you're using and having information to explain this AI instrument and how it works. With very complex AI systems, this can be very challenging. Now, imagine that if you're a decentralized protocol or a team behind a decentralized protocol, and then how do you use this? Especially when, for example, you might have other teams working in that decentralized protocol that are not managed by you, the main team. So, still, my fear is that there will not be any kind of like specific framework for crypto, and that can bring challenges to its application. But at the same time, when AI comes into force, or the AI regulation is to come into force, which is still a bit unclear now at this stage, but even if it comes into force in late this year or early next year, we still don't have any rules for DeFi. So we're still going to be waiting to see what is going to happen on that front. And maybe there can be a connection or work between regulators in the trimming of the AI Act for financial institutions and then also for crypto businesses.
AI to me makes a lot of sense in the manufacturing area, and I worked in insurance for a long time in my life, and insurance too. And then you just mentioned, with the algorithms, with trading, with the exchange sense for those decisions. But if you back up to the blockchain itself, how do you think that AI can intersect with the crypto, in the infrastructure, and how is that something that MiCA should look at long term, or is that never going to come into play?
Well, a difficult question. I have some computer programming formation, not enough, not even close to kind of be able to evaluate the possibility of AI. I do some research on AI in fintech applications. But one thing that I can see is, for example, how AI can be used, or AI programs can be used, for example, for the interaction for interoperability between protocols, for example, and between the use of, or even for governance of certain protocols, or in the exercise of, let's say, taking decisions, issuing decisions, applying decisions in the protocol. I can see some options where that can happen. Of course, in the user experience of protocols, in the UX, the use of AI or chatbots or some kind of tools on that might be useful. But I see it at trading, of course, also, so exchanges will use it and are already using to some extent. But I think one biggest area where with blockchain can bring is on interoperability, chain interoperability, because we still don't. Okay, Ethereum is arguably the largest chain in the market, arguably the largest operator, and the one that everyone is developing. And even the fact that there are layer 2s is a tribute to the layer 1. But it's not the only ecosystem that exists. There's still a lot of ecosystems still. Let's say the battle for the silver in the gold of Ethereum is still going on. And I'm making a parallel, for example, what happens with the idea of open banking, right? There's this idea of open banking, and even connecting also selling financial products with banking products and with insurance products, and making it all together possible. And AI plays a significant role on this in the way that you can manage and even predict and work within this framework. Why not use also AI for the interoperability of different chains, of different tokens, of different market makers and products. Of course, the problem with AI is always who is developing the AI program, and how is that AI program going to be incorporated as a kind of an API or whatever within the system, right? But it's, or even, let's say, smart contracts are not AI per se. They're more they're not predictive. They're more deterministic in a way. If I do this, then this, that. But maybe some smart contracts can also start becoming a little bit more clever in trying to take options. Let's say if this happens, but if there are other options, then maybe I can take this other option. So to start acting based on probability of situations when, for example, making investments in the DAO or transferring liquidity from one protocol to the other, or even managing, for example, pegging systems in algorithm stablecoins or other stablecoins or other DeFi protocols. I don't know. I'm speculating, but I see that there might be some things. But again, I don't know what the potential of AI in the world will be. Like if AI is all about ChatGPT, yeah, cool, but it's not going to bring, let's say, something so new to the table on this. If AI becomes something a little bit more advanced and that could act more autonomously within, I think it can match up pretty well with crypto, but then bring also other challenges, governance of this AI, governance of the protocols, etc. I would say that.
I ask you to speculate because I've been looking at this market since past years. I've been following it like all the time, right? And I did not see this new meme coin wave coming. And you're building these regulations. You're looking at everything. You think you know everything. You think you have everything covered, and then something like this meme coin thing pops up out of nowhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you begin to even play whack-a-mole, building these regulations?
Yeah, well, it's going back to what we were saying in the beginning between the US and the EU system. One thing good about the US is that these whack-a-moles, these meme coins, these whatever is in the pipeline can appear because people are just, why not go in there? And in Europe, the problem is that they can also appear, but people are a bit more scared of trying to bring them on because they see this very big and heavy set of regulations that are in place and don't know very well how to fight it or how to mingle with that. But the problem with regulation, there's always kind of the hare and the turtle thing, right? More than technology, human creativity is always one step ahead of what happened before. And then the problem for policymakers, lawmakers, is what do we do? Do we start doing laws like crazy? Do we start legislating like nuts every time? Let's say a meme coin law, or amending existing laws to try to and this there are states that try to do this in Europe, and the problem is that suddenly you have this very burdensome legal system, complex, that you never know very well how to work with. So what do? You don't do anything. You just let the market go. And well, the problem is that there are people in the market, specifically consumers, but even other businesses, are not going to be sufficiently protected if you have these kind of meme coins and other systems going up. So you have to find some middle ground on this. And one way is, for example, also apply previous regulation to this, right? Kind of the US is saying, we have this 90-year-old regulation, we have the Howey test, we have all of this. So let's just, force the Howey test into this. Or try to adapt the Howey test to this, or try to adapt this to the Howey test, or kind of a more iterative regulation. None of the solutions, in a way, is ideal because the world in itself is always this and the market is this monster of dynamics that are ever contradictory. It pulls to one side, and when we go to the side, it's already pulling to the other, it's already pulling to the other, it's already pulling to the other. And so from a legal standpoint, I think that it's good to have some sort of regulation, but regulation that works with open principles, let's call it like that, or statutes that are open principles. There can be some rule-like precepts, but I think that principle-based precepts would be better because they're broader, they're more open, and they're easier to manage. And then there has to exist kind of a regulatory culture where that is, let's say, conscious enough of the market. So understanding that there is a market, we need to leave the market to work to a certain extent, but we also need to jump in when the market is not able to take care of itself, because the market most of the time also cannot take care of itself in some parts, at least my view. This is a very highly personal view. I admit that it might be discussed. And so this kind of where to join in with this balance, that's the key. But that's why I think that legislation should be, I'm actually a bit conservative on that in the sense that I think that old regulation, there's no new things to be regulated. All of this, if we think well about crypto, existed before with financial markets, existed before with iron markets, existed before in, with currency wars. All of this existed before. This is just done in new ways with new complexities, but it can be drawn to other logics, normative logics that we had before, and maybe we can apply to them. But we have to understand that why those normative logics were put in place and how they make sense in today's world. And today's world is not a world of, let's say, of shipbuilding and going around the world, etc. This is the world of meme coins. This is the world of AI. This is the world of ChatGPT. This is a world of podcasts being recorded via Zoom between Portugal and the US in a simple and fair way, right? And this is the world where we live. And so I think that policymakers and regulators have a daunting job. Have a really daunting job. I don't envy them at all. I have to work with them. I have sometimes work not really against them, because you're not really never against the regulator, but you have to work with them and try to make things with them. But I envy their I don't envy their test. That's what I want to say, because I understand the difficulties. But I think that there has to be, let's say, an openness to new developments and to new rules, and a very good technical knowledge of the rules in order to try to apply them and to reach a common goal, which is social development and prosperity for everyone involved.
I agree. I love that. Yeah, awesome. And thank you for answering my difficult questions today.
I hope I did well.
You did well.
They were very demanding questions, but they were good.
You did well. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I have one last question, and it's easy.
Okay.
How can people get more information about you and about your company, what you do? How can they do that?
Okay. So we are based in Europe, although we work, as I told you, with companies from around the world, from Asia, from the Arab countries, from the US, also from Latin America. We're still a young team, small team, trying to expand it. And yeah, we do, if there are, let's say, policy concerns regarding the way that crypto regulation is being applied, or doubts or questions, we can help you navigate this. We can help you develop products and understand what are the regulatory requirements that you need to have in in order to sell these products in the jurisdictions where you are. We can engage with stakeholders, other stakeholders, policymakers, in order to try to advance your concerns and try to have a voice in this regulatory discussion. And it can also help you with, let's say, providing regulatory assessments on jurisdictions, on business practices, on new developments, and help you with any kind of issues that you have regulatory-wise with your crypto business. That's basically what we do.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Jamil, and thank you. Congrats for your podcast.